This past Sunday, I read another ridiculous column by Mr. Martin Hackworth in the Idaho State Journal. Now, Martin is a perfect example of what I call dococrats. A dococrat is one of these who has a doctorate in this and a doctorate in that. And they feel themselves superior to everyone else because of their massive education. But really, they have little education in the real world. You see, they spend their lives inside the marbled halls and granite walls of our universities. They have never run a business. They have never created a product. They have never made a payroll. And yet they think themselves masters of all of us who actually work for a living. Now, Hackworth follows the traditional progressive playbook, and that playbook is simply this. It is to attack. You see, people like Hackworth feel tall when they make someone else feel short. They feel important when they make someone feel unimportant. They feel significant when they can degrade and defile someone else. And so it goes in his column. Now, he started out by making a statement that I found a little bit bizarre. He said, quote, "Two things that schools really need are Common Core and sports." Then he went on to prove his point by falling into that progressive game plan of tearing everyone down. And he said, quote, "The debate over Common Core is one of the most deliberately misinformed controversies out there. In a country where 1 in 5 believe that the president is Muslim and 1 in 3 don't believe in evolution, this should not, perhaps, be particularly surprising. If, on the other hand, you were trying to raise a nation of dolts, it would be hard to argue against our current trajectory." He doesn't make a point. He doesn't make an argument for what's good or right. He just tears down. And he continues. He says, "For many years, I assigned a pretest to college freshmen in my introductory astronomy class to gauge their general level of knowledge about the natural world. The results were not encouraging. Few were ever able to explain why the sky is blue. About a fourth were unable to identify the Earth as the third planet from the sun. Half could not name the very bright star directly overhead at noon each day. Nor the year that humans first walked on the moon. 2/3 could not name the 3 particles of an atom. An astonishing number could not correctly identify the number closer to 7 on a number line, 4 or 9. So now that he's had an opportunity to tear everyone down, and then he elevated himself that he might look large compared to those that he has just made small, he said, "Having done something that I am quite sure that the majority of Common Core critics have not, read it. I'm having some trouble coming up with a rational basis for most of the controversy. As a whole, I like what I see." Well, Mr. Hackworth, let me help you see some of the truth. First of all, I have seen and I have read much of Common Core, but most importantly, I have read the National Sexuality Standards. Now, the introduction to this says that this is part of the core education that's going to happen in the United States. This is the type of education that violates parental rights to raise their children, to teach them values, to teach them the precepts that have been a part of our country forever, to teach them about their religion and their God. But what it does do is it requires that our kindergartners identify different types of family groups. You know, mom and dad, mom and mom, dad and dad. But not only that, they have to defend them. They have to understand all this nonsense about gender identity. You know, it's crazy to me that we have gone so far afield on this. Gender means one of two things. Gender is either male or female. That is, of course, unless you check in with the Idaho State Journal, or with our Pocatello University, or with Facebook for that matter. Change your profile today. It will ask you, what is your gender? And then it will give you more than 50 possible choices. 50? Where in the world can you come up with that? These sexuality standards require our children to study resources in addition to their parents where they can go for sexual help, like birth control or STDs or abortions. I mean, after all, why trouble a parent for something so insignificant? But while these are troubling, this is not the reason that we must kill Common Core. You see, Mr. Hackworth made a big deal out of how few of his students were able to do different things. And so I will make a big deal out of how few of our dococrats are able to do simple, basic things. For example, Article 1, Section 1 of the Constitution is only 25 words long. It says, all legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and a House of Representatives. It's only 25 words, and yet, as nearly as I can tell, 9 out of 10 dococrats do not understand this simple sentence. Now there's Article 1, Section 8. Now, I'm not going to read that because it's a little longer, but it's only 429 words. And they used English to produce this, and so it's fairly clear. And Article 1, Section 8 identifies what Congress can do. And it's limited to that. And in case you don't understand this, like dococrats don't, because 9 out of 10 dococrats can't comprehend this either. But just in case, for those that are so educated that they become stupid, there's the 10th Amendment, which tells us that all powers not specifically granted to the federal government in the Constitution are powers relegated to the states or the people. So, Mr. Hackworth, here is the biggest reason that Common Core must go away. As you read through Article 1, Section 8, you will not find any portion of that document that justifies the federal government mandating what education should be. But what we can find is testimony after testimony from our founding fathers that specifically tell us that tyranny is the result when all powers reside in one place or in one person. Now, Hackworth is proud of his son, and his son recently wrote an article where he challenged the Constitution, suggested that it's no longer valid. I assume that that young man was regurgitating his father's tripe. So why we must stop Common Core is simply this. When all powers reside in one place, they beget tyranny. Common Core, regardless of whether some components of it are good or some are just completely evil, like the sexuality standards are, it cannot be allowed to happen because it is a gateway drug to tyranny. It gives the federal government powers over us. It takes away our right as educators. It takes away our right as parents. It takes away our rights as a community to raise and educate our own children. Now, we do have problems in our education system. We were once number one in the world. We're a far cry from that today. But I would suggest that you look to another cause. You see, there was a time when we spent much less on our children. There was a time when we didn't have federal programs to make sure that we would do things right. There was a time when we didn't have federal programs to make sure that we properly taught our children when parents failed. Now we have all of this. And still, we lag behind the rest of the world. But if you look at what has changed while our education standards fell, our immorality was on the rise. Our loss of faith was on the rise. Our lack of any sense of right and wrong was on the rise. Homosexuality was on the rise. Single parenting was on the rise. our children are not being successfully educated in schools, because our children are not being brought up in homes where they are taught standards and responsibility, where they are taught the value of work, where they are taught to respect God. No. They're taught that anything goes. And so when they show up at school, anything goes. I'm Lance Earl. I'll see you soon.